Bienvenue, welcome, Salamat Peggy, and hello. We are about to embark upon the politics course, and thank you for choosing. We never forget you have a choice, and we hope that you'll enjoy the next couple of years. Anyway, we're going to start off at the beginning. We're going to start off by looking at different government structures. And why not start with the most simple, that is the tyrant or the despot. And this was described by James Madison in 1788 as the accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive and judiciary in the same hands, whether of one, a few or many, and whether hereditary, self-appointed or elective. And he said that this could justly be pronounced the very definition of tyranny. Now, going forward, I'm going to assume that you are capable of reading, but that does not absolve me of my responsibility for telling you exactly what these phrases mean. And really, that's where we're going to go, because this is so fundamental to the nature of the whole course going forward. So let's push on. We'll start again with our pal Joffrey. There he is now. Horror of horrors, one day he discovers that he is completely cashed out. So he needs to raise some more taxes. In order to raise more taxes, he needs laws. Laws are how we raise taxes, and so there we go. He writes himself a law that enables him to shake out the peasants of their gold and florins and whatever currency they use in Westeros or wherever the hell he is. Now, obviously there may be some citizens who are reluctant to part with their cash, and so we need some muscle to help him along. Nevertheless, there will still be those malefactors who refuse to pay up, and they of course will need to go to trial. Now, of course, Joffrey himself was not in a position to sit in this trial because of his minor inconvenience of being dead. Nevertheless, we have due process, which will come with a result, and the result will tell us whether or not that person is innocent, guilty, and exactly what we should do with them according to the terms of law. So there are three stages here. We have a writing of the law, the implementation or execution of the law, and the arbitration of the law. And this really is what these various aspects of the state are all about. Now, we don't live in an absolute democracy, an absolute monarchy. We instead have what's known as a democracy. Democracies are where power flows from the people up the political chain. We are the highest level of democracy in our particular, highest level of political authority in our system. That's the people, whether you vote or not, it really doesn't matter. That is where all power comes from. And we don't have Joffrey to write our legislation for us. Instead, we have the highly trained and remunerated experts, yeah, that's right, who live in or who work in Parliament. Those are our elected representatives. They write the law for us. And instead of having the Hound to shake down the people who don't pay their taxes, we have him, who's almost as scary. And instead of sitting in front of Charles Dance and accounting for your crimes, now you have to account for it in front of the judiciary. But the basic principle remains the same. We have a legislature that writes the law, we have an executive that executes the law, and then we have a judiciary that sits in arbitration of the law. Put all those together and you come up with what we know as the legal pyramid. Here it is. Very, very simple and very, very straightforward. A legal pyramid. Now that's too simple. We need to make it slightly more complicated. So we need to introduce a fourth element to this particular diagram. We've still got our legislature, there it is. We've still got our executive and our judiciary, but now we're going to introduce a C. And the C stands for citizen. And here, within this particular arrangement here, as described by this pyramid with its four corners, we have the state. And I've chosen to represent it with our wonderful flag, the Union. So this is the state, and everything that happens within here is described by the Constitution. Now, the Constitution can be perceived as two things. First of all, it's a blueprint. That is, it shows how all of this is organized. And then we can also look at the Constitution as a contract between us, the citizen, and the rest of the state. And so a constitution is two things. It is a blueprint in that it gives us the organization of the offices of the state, and it is a contract between the citizen and the state. And one last thing before we move off this particular slide This bit here, everything inside the state, everything that's described by the Constitution, we describe as being in the public domain. It is public, it is in the public domain, and therefore it is effectively a concern of government. Anything outside that public domain is said to be private, in that it is not the business of government, and government has absolutely no interest in what you are doing. We'll spend a lot of time looking at these concepts in much more detail, so if they're not entirely clear right now, don't worry too much, but bring those questions along to the lesson. That's why we have the handouts to accompany these presentations. Make your notes on them, bring them to lessons, and we will clarify any problems that you have got. It bears saying at this point how things are going to work out. We're going to look at the legislature, we're going to look at our parliament, we're going to look at the executive, that is the government, and we're going to look at the judiciary, that's the courts, and then we're going to look at the Constitution, which is the thing that binds all of these different ideas together, the plans and the rules. And that's about it. I'm sure you're going to have some questions that follow from that, and I look forward to fielding them. Bring them along to the next lesson, and I'll speak to you then. Until then, take care.